between us are the books. We have the books, we have the libraries, we have the shuruhat, we have all of the aqwal of the ulama that are at our hands. If you have an issue with something that is said, take it back to them and see what they had to say about it. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So previously, I made a video about usul al-madakhilah, and I wanted to talk about the main issues that the madakhilah go against Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in it. And I mentioned also within that video that people should not necessarily rush to calling people names even if they fit these characteristics. And while the name is out there, and while there are real people that fit into these characteristics are something, each individual one of them can be talked about individually, such as tashni' al-mukhalif. So like someone who goes really hard against somebody who goes against them, and this issue is something that is an understandable difference. And so I mentioned also in a separate video about understandable differences. And I talked about that there are certain areas where there's khilaf in that, and if there's khilaf in this, then we need to deal with each other in a respectful way. And if we don't deal with each other in a respectful way, then in this case, we're going against the manhaj of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And also, I talked about in the usul al-madakhilah, one of the major issues that they go astray in is when it comes to wulat al-umur. And they think that the wulat al-umur are the people that are in control now. And maybe some of them do actually fulfill the conditions of this, and some of them definitely do not. And then they give them this title, and then after they give them this title, anyone who does anything that goes against what we'll talk about today, anything that's considered khuruj or anything of this sort, even talking about them publicly, this is something that warrants tabdi', and for someone to go up against them and say this guy's person from Ahlul Bid'ah, he's from the Khawarij, and all these other things which are problematic as well. And as far as like the Khawarij and this term of the Khawarij, I also made a video about this term in and of itself. And this term in and of itself, the best way that encompasses who are the Khawarij is someone who does takfir of someone without valid evidence from the Sharia. And then on top of this, they use this takfir to make this person's blood halal. So these are who the Khawarij are. And also on top of this understanding, just because somebody goes against a leader doesn't make them a Khawarij, because this also means that this person would have an idea of doing takfir without valid evidence. So if the takfir is without valid evidence, yes, this person would be of the Khawarij. If they're doing takfir without valid evidence, regardless of whether there's a leader they're doing the takfir of, or whether they're doing takfir of just individuals that are about without valid evidence of doing this takfir. This is the definition of the Khawarij that encompasses the first original Khawarij, who are the ones who are doing takfir of the Sahaba and whatnot, and then also it encompasses those who came after them that also fall into this issue. And in that video also, I brought up the view of al-Imam al-Qurtubi when he was talking about in the tafsir of إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. So in the tafsir of this, he brought a bunch of aqwal talking about the Khalifa and talking about the shurut of the shurut or the conditions of the Khalifa and what are these composed of. And I talked about some of the conditions of the Khalifa, and I also talked about what is the main job of a Khalifa. And the main job of the Khalifa, or even less than him, is an Amir or Wali al-amr, one that has taken that wilayah, which is an authority. The wilayah is an authority that is given to him by the Sharia, that he is able to use on the people that are under him, and they are to obey him in matters that pertain to this wilayah. And so I brought up in this wilayah, there's some conditions that are in that wilayah, and these conditions are very important for a person to look into and make sure that these conditions are there. These conditions that are within the wilayah, they can be broken down into three categories. One of the categories is al-dururi. It has to be there. If it's not there, then the whole purpose of the wilayah itself is null and void. Like there's no point of the wilayah. And of these is of course the title that was given for like what is a Wali al-amr, or what is the Amir, what is his job title? It's iqamat ad-din fi dunya wa siyasatu an-nas bihi. And so the establishing of the deen in the dunya and leading the people according to it. This is the title of the Wali al-amr. So let's look at this. Is this person establishing the deen in the dunya? That's the first thing. That's the most important. And this is of the basic conditions for someone to be a wali al-amr. They have to be establishing the deen in the dunya, and then also leading the people according to it. Imam al-Qurtubi, he brought in there that the jumhur, he said qala al-jumhur, and he talked about that the majority of the ulama, they say, if the wali al-amr, after his act has already been established, if his act as the wali al-amr comes into play, and then after that he becomes a fasiq, then his wilaya is null and void. And so he says this is what the jumhur say. And so, of course, of the main characteristics of the conditions for a wali al-amr is adala. Adala is one of the conditions that have to be there. And for us to choose a wali al-amr that has no adala from the get-go, then this doesn't work. Like, this is not permissible for us to choose that. Now, if someone came into power and they had problems with their adala, then al-Qurtubi, he says the jumhur, the majority, they say that this destroys his leadership. Like, his leadership is null and void from this. And then he also brought in another view, which is no, the fisq itself does not break the wilaya in and of itself. Fisq. And then he brought up a couple other conditions that you can go back and look in the video and when I explain that. Now, I wanted to bring the other side of it, ijma, which is very important. And the reason that this is important is because this is the ijma that many of those who will constantly say there's no such that khuruj, anyone who talks about khuruj, or anyone talks about that we don't need to obey and these rulers and the sama wa ta'a, anyone who talks about this and discusses it and says something about it or says something about these people, then they are doing a type of khuruj against these wulat al-umur, and that these people are from ahl al-bid'ah, they're from, whether they say that they're the ikhwan, or whether they say they're the khawarij, all of these other names that they throw out for people. And so before we have the ikhwan and before all these other people, and I'm not from them, I don't support them and whatnot, this is not something, none of my teachers are from them. And so it's also important for us to look and to see, what did the Ahlul Ilm say beforehand about these issues. We take it back to what they had to say about this, and this is very important. Between us are the books. We have the books, we have the libraries, we have the shuruhat, we have all of the aqwal of the ulama that are at our hands. If you have an issue with something that is said, take it back to them and see what they had to say about it. This is something, we have the books, they're available. You have the ability to look things up and check whether or not this is actually true, what the ulama have to say about this thing. And if this consensus that is claimed about there's no such thing as khuruj, and anyone does khuruj, they're going against the consensus, the ijma that Imam Nawawi brought. And so this is important, that we look at what did he bring, and make sure that we understand the consensus also in light of the other views that are out there, such as the view that I brought with Imam al-Qurtubi. It could almost seem at odds in totality with the consensus that is brought with Imam Nawawi. And the strange thing is that he also says it's the majority opinion, that if a leader, after has already been established as a leader, if he becomes a fasiq, then his wilayat, his leadership, the wilayah, is null and void. And so Imam Nawawi, he talks about this in the Sharh Muslim, and this is the Sharh Muslim that I'm going to bring up here, and I'm going to be reading from this to read what he actually says about this ijma. And this is the place where the ijma that people mention, the ijma of that there's no khuruj. This is the part that they mention. And what is strange, though, what I found most of the time, the people that mention this ijma, they will copy paste the first part of his sentences, don't copy and paste what's around it in the context, because there's a lot of other aqwal that are around this that are super important that a person understands. And when someone takes and picks the context and then they put it right in front of you and say, oh, there's ijma, this, that, and the other, did you read the rest of the context of what there is also ijma on about the rest of the issue? It's not such a clear-cut, simple issue that a lot of people want to make it out to be. So I will put the words of this on the screen there. I will read from it and give a basic explanation of it with some notes also on this while translating it. And also, I will mention a couple of the issues that are very important that we understand. And as I mentioned before, before I go into this, that wilaya Wilaya is the authority that the Sharia has given to a person over another person. And this wilaya is of different levels. So there's some levels of wilaya, such as the wilaya of a father over his son. There's a certain level of wilaya with this. Like, so the father can do transactions on behalf of the son for the son's money that is in the well-being of that son's money. And this is of the strongest of the wilayat. And also, the son needs to obey the father. What does he obey him in, though? He obeys him what is reasonable. And also, there's a wilaya of the husband over the wife. And in this wilaya as well, this is in what is reasonable. So if a husband told his wife, you need to fast today, is it obligatory for her to fast? And there's no scholar that says it's obligatory for her to fast if he tells her that she needs to fast. That makes a supererogatory fast obligatory on her. Is this something that happens? No, and there's no scholar that will say that. So of course we see that yes, there is obedience, but this obedience isn't just in general. One of my shuyukh was talking about a fatwa that came to him, and a woman was in a relationship, and the man was kind of majnoon. And he basically told her, you need to stand up in the bathroom, I believe, with your hands above your head for an hour or two. And she's like, do I have to obey him? No, you don't have to obey him. This was the fatwa that he gave to her. No, like the obedience is what is suitable for that relationship. So that obedience is what is known in that relationship. Of course, if it came to intimacy, okay, yes, this needs to be obeyed. What is within the boundaries of the Sharia, yes. And the same thing with a person who is a leader. The leader of a country, he is also a wali al-amr. And the way what amr is this? This is the amr of the deen. This leadership here, though, it pertains to what has to do with the leadership of people and whatnot. So if he has certain rules about how people are supposed to drive on the roads and whatnot, of course, these extra laws here, they don't go against the Sharia. But if he brings something that replaces something from the Sharia, this is the issue. He has no right to enforce this on somebody. Or if he goes into things that the Sharia gave him no right to talk about, or gave him no right to legislate in it, then in this case he's going against the Sharia, and there's no obedience that comes just because he tells you to do this. And of course, this obedience with each wilaya is contingent on what the wilaya is, and also what is ma'ruf in this wilaya. And this is just a little bit of a precursor. And as I mentioned before, the conditions for the imam, or if we're going to say a little less than an imam, so we have the imam al-akbar, like the biggest, the imam, there's the khalifa. Or we can also have umara. So traditionally, even if there was a khalifa, there would always be umara over all of the different and smaller nations. So they'd be like many nations, and they would all say we're under the khalifa. Okay, so this amir here, he is also a mini one of the original one, and he also has the ability to act on behalf of that original one. And also, as another precursor, the reason that the emir is given this authority is ultimately he's a wakil on the people to establish the dunya, establish the deen in the dunya. And so this amir is a wakil of the people, because Allah told us to establish the deen. Allah told us to establish the hudud. Allah told us with many different commands that can only be done under a single banner. And so there's also ijma that comes by many of the ulama. They've talked about the ijma of the obligation of having a khalifa. And so this is a very important ijma that we understand. It's like, okay, if there's ijma about that, there's an obligation for us to have a khalifa, this is very important to keep in mind whenever we have discussions around this afterwards. Yes, we're only held accountable for what we're able to do. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. That we're not held to more than we're able to do. But we also have to understand this is the obligation. The obligation is a khalifa. And may Allah give us back the khalifa of someone who is just and adil, and that establishes the deen in the dunya and leads the people according to this. And if you didn't say ameen to this dua, you need to check something in your iman. Wallahu musta'an. So Imam Nawawi, he brings up, and in this tab'a, I'll bring it up on the screen, but it's page 54 in the 11th majallad. So he brings this in here, and he talks in this particular bab, which is talking about the obligation of obeying the umara. And this is a great bab. And he says, باب وجوب طاعة الأمراء في غير معصية وتحريمها في المعصية. So he talks about this, that this is the bab that has to do with obedience to the umara with what is not a ma'asiyah, and the hurma, that the tahrim, that this is something that's haram to do in something that is a ma'asiyah. And so he brings up, so of course this is the sharh of the Sahih Muslim, and I'll bring the hadith that I'm going to start off with, which has to do with إِلَّا أَن تَرَوْا كُفْرًا بَوَاحًا عِنْدَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ فِيهِ بُرْهَانٌ. And so in this hadith, that is relayed by Junadah ibn Abi Umayyah, that he says, قال دخلنا على عبادة بن صامت. And so they entered in upon Ubadah, وهو مريض, and he was sick. And they said, فقال, and then he said, فقلنا حدثنا أصلحك الله بحديث ينفع الله به سمعته من رسول الله. And so he says, narrate a hadith that you've heard from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after making dua that Allah would fix his situation, and that he would and that this hadith would be beneficial, that Allah would benefit us with this hadith. And so he says in response to this, فقال دعانا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فبايعناه. So he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called them, and that they gave the bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is that agreement of following what he says, and giving them their loyalty. This kind of like a pledge of allegiance. And of course it's called the bay'ah because the bay'ah is the hand in Arabic, and so mubay'ah, or this is when you put a hand into another hand and you shake the hand in agreement that this is what you're going to hold to. So he mentions this, and he says, فَبَيَعْنَاهُ, that they gave the bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَكَانَ فِيمَا أَخَذَ عَلَيْنَا. And he says, he mentioned some of the things that were a part of what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and gave them as a part of this allegiance. And he said, of the things that they needed to do, أَنْ بَايَعْنَا عَلَى السَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ, that they gave the bay'ah upon obedience of listening and obedience of sama' wa ta'a, fi manshitina wa makrahina. And this is in the good times and the things that we are ready to do, and that we are able to do and ready to do, and the things that we don't like. And also he says, وَعُسْرِنَا وَيُسْرِنَا, in the hardships and in times of ease. وَأَثَرَةٍ عَلَيْنَا, and also when it comes to athara, which is a type of someone wanting the dunya over, putting the dunya first and maybe oppressing them. And of course, Imam Nawawi will talk about this word a little bit later. وَأَلَّا نُنَازِعَ الْأَمْرَ أَهْلَهُ, and then also that we won't nunazir, which is go against. It's like go against or like struggle with al-amr ahlah, and that we won't take away. In this case, we wouldn't take away or go against, and it has these different meanings in there. That we would not take the amr, which is like the leadership, away from ahlah, and that we would not take it away from the person who is rightfully that. And so this is also ahlahu is very key point here. قال إلا أن تروا كفرا بواحا عندكم من الله فيه برهان, except, and then he said, except that you see kufran bawaha. And so kufran bawah, I'll bring up the explanation that Imam Nawawi gives. And of course bawah means like something that's very clear. That you have عندكم من الله فيه برهان, that, and another of the characteristics of this kufr is that you have evidence with Allah, that you have clear evidence, burhan, which is clear evidence. And so Imam Nawawi, when rahimahullah, when he talks about this hadith, it says قوله إلا أن تروا كفرا بواحا عندكم من الله فيه برهان. He explains this part of the hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, and he says هكذا هو لمعظم الرواة وفي معظمها النسخ بواحا and بالواو. And so he talks about some of the wordings of how this came here, and the linguistic parts of this, and I'll go over it quickly. If you know Arabic, then you follow along. وفي بعضها براحا, And this is another type of narration that it came. So either bawahan or barahan. والباء مفتوح فيهما مفتوحة فيهما ومعناهما كفرا ظاهرا. And so he says, and the meaning behind this, the meaning behind either bawahan or barahan is, and that it is kufr that is very apparent. That's apparent, a kufr. And he says, وَالْمُرَادُ بِالْكُفْرِ هُنَا الْمَعَاصِي. And Imam Nawawi here, and this is the view that he brings here, is he says the intention with this kufr here is al-ma'asi. It's sins. And ma'asi, what he means by here is like kufr al-ni'mah, which is a kufr duna kufr. It's not the greatest kufr, but it's a kufr that's duna kufr. And this is his view here. And of course, like, this is not like many of the scholars have talked about, this is not necessarily the correct view, but understand when you are understanding this hadith, and then you take what Imam Nawawi uses with this hadith, understand this is his view also, that this kufr here is not the kufr that takes him out of Islam, but rather this is kufr that is duna kufr. As many people like to say about وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. They say, oh, this is kufr duna kufr. All right, and so like this is the kufr that he's talking about here, is kufr duna kufr. And he says تَعْلَمُونَهُ مِنْ دِينِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. When he talks about عِنْدَكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِيهِ بُرْهَانٌ, he says what this means is that you know it from the deen of Allah, that you know this from Allah's deen. And he says وَمَعْنَى الْحَدِيث لَا تُنَازِعُوا وُلَاةَ الْأُمُورِ فِي وِلَايَتِهِمْ. He says, don't go against the wulat al-umur, which is wulat is the plural of wali, the person who is in charge of umur, of the matters. Of course, like the one in place of leadership, in his leadership. Don't go against him in his leadership. ولا تعترضوا عليهم إلا أن تروا منهم منكرا محققا تعلمونه من قواعد الإسلام. He says, and don't go against them except if you see from them. Don't go against them, except if you see from them, and this is the meaning that he gives, munkaran, something that's munkar. Don't go against them unless you see from them munkaran, muhaqqaqan, that is something that is clear-cut munkar. There's no doubt about this munkar, but rather it's clear-cut munkar, that you know min qawaid al-Islam, that you know from the basic principles of Islam, that you know from the foundation of Islam, this is something that is not accepted in the deen, this is munkar without a doubt. And so in this case, this is something that you could go against them with this. This is the understanding of what he says here. Don't go against them except unless you see munkar that is clear-cut munkar. And so of course he doesn't give the explanation here as kufr. And of course, like that, kufr is even more than this. But he gives it as something that's munkar, just clear munkar here. And he says, فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ ذَلِكَ فَأَنْكِرُوا عَلَيْهِمْ وَقُولُوا بِالْحَقِّ حَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُمْ. And so he says, and if you've seen this from them, that munkar, from them, then you should do inkar upon them. وَقُولُوا بِالْحَقِّ حَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُمْ. And then to say and bring the haqq and say the truth wherever you are. Wherever you are, whatever your place is, say the truth wherever you are. حَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُمْ. Whatever your position is, wherever you are, say the truth if you see this munkar from them. وَأَمَّا الْخُرُوجُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَقِتَالُهُمْ فَحَرَامٌ بِإِجْمَاعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And so here's the next part, which of course the people will hold on to. But of course they should look at the sentence, like the madakhila, they should look at the sentence beforehand. That he basically says, ankiru alayhim. Of course, if you say ankiru alayhim, what do you mean by this? They mean silently. Okay, silently. If he was actually, let's say, okay, if he was actually walatul umur, then we'd say silently is always the best, for the most part. But of course, if there's none of this, then of course you look into what is gonna cause the greatest good and remove the greatest amount of harm. And we look at this. If it's going to create more harm than good, okay, no. If it's going to create more good, or if the harm is minor and the good coming out of it is much more, then we look at this. But he says here, but as far, and so he makes a difference between saying things and whatnot. But he says, وَأَمَّا الْخُرُوجُ عَلَيْهِمْ. But doing khuruj on these people, which is like fighting them, وَقِتَالُهُمْ فَحَرَامٌ. And so to fight them and go to war with them, so it's haram to do it on them. And بِإِجْمَاعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And so he says it's haram to do this with the ijma of the Muslimin, to do this on the wulatul umur. All right, and we understand that wulatul umur is a specific term that comes in the Sharia, and it has certain conditions and it has a certain description. If someone doesn't fight if they're not in this description, then this wilaya is not something that makes them a part. If they don't hold the wilaya, then they're not of these people, and they're going to be dealt with in a different way. And I'll mention this as coming up. And so he says here, فَحَرَامُ بِإِجْمَاعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And so he says this is haram to go against wilatul umur with ijma' of the Muslimin. And he mentions this here. وَإِن كَانُوا فَسَقَةً ظَالِمِينَ. And so he says, and even if they are fasaqah, ظالمين. And so here he brings the ijma' that he brings here, which I'll talk about. How does this go together with the apparent meaning that al-Qurtubi brings in his tafsir, that the majority is upon, if the person is a fasiq, then his ijma' is null and void. And this was the majority opinion that he brought. So he says here with ijma', even if they are fasaqah. And so, zalimin. How do we put these two together? And I'll bring it up. It's at the end of what he says here is actually at the end of it, going back to because of the amount of bloodshed that would be caused if someone were to do this and this, that, and the other. And so he says here, وَقَدْ تَظَاهَرَتِ الْأَحَادِيثُ بِمَعْنَ مَا ذَكَرْتُهُ. And so he says also that there's a ton of hadith that are very, very clear about this matter. And of course, many of the people will bring these up. And it's also important to understand there's a general principle in the Sharia. In matters that are within the fitrah of insan not to do, then the Sharia brings a little bit of it will either come softly with a prohibition for this thing, or it won't even speak about it. Such as of the things that is haram bil ijma' is tadammuk bil najasa, akramakumullah, that for someone to wipe najas on his body and whatnot, and to wipe it all over. This is something that's haram bil ijma'. Give me a Quran or hadith that talks about this. And there's no Quran or hadith that talks about this. This is something it's known from of course there's qawaid that we look at within the Quran and the Sunnah, we can take from maybe like general texts, but specifically on this, the Sharia is mostly silent about this. But yet with ijma' it's haram. And the same thing is like someone marrying his mother. The Sharia it mentions it once in passing. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ. Okay, this is one thing, and then it keeps going. But it doesn't need to go very far in this matter, and going very, very strong in this matter. But when the nufus of insan, like when the desires of people are very, very pointed in a certain direction, then the Sharia comes with tons and tons of text to make sure that this area is clear cut for that issue. So of course nobody wants to marry their mother. So the Sharia comes with a basic text that's very simple. Everyone knows that this is haram. All right. And now when it comes to going against the wulatul umur, this is something the Arabs, they're very independent kind of people, and they were very quick to go to war with people and to fight about this. So many texts came in response to this, to the nature of insan, to go up against other people. And of course, with many of these texts, it comes up. And this is why we have so many of these texts that come up about this. And of course, this is so that people don't forget this matter and they understand the seriousness of this matter. And of course, the blood of the Muslimin is a very, very serious matter. Like shedding blood without a purpose, or going to war with people without a purpose and whatnot. This is something that's a very serious matter, and that the Sharia looks very, very, it takes very good care of making sure that the Muslims are in the best position possible. Moving on, after he mentioned this, there's a ton of hadiths that talk about this. He says, وَأَجْمَعَ أَهْلُ السُّنَّةِ أَنَّهُ لَا يَنْعَزِلُ السُّلْطَانُ بِفِسْقٍ. And so here he mentions this. He says that there is ijma' from Ahl Sunnah that the sultan is not removed because of fisq, which is like the leader is not removed because of some type of fisq that comes about. And if we were to put this together with the other one, maybe we could put this together in some of the ways that some of the shuyukh had put this together, is that this is fisq shakhsi, like this is his personal fisq, and there's personal fisq, and then there's because if we're going to look at a fisq that goes against other people, then we do have a lot of we have like scholars such as Ibn Hazm, and we also have scholars such as Juwayni and more, and even and also Qurtubi, that talk about fisq is something that would render their wilaya invalid. So it's not ijma' here. There's definitely an issue like for fisq that is personal. Okay, maybe we can see there's ijma' here. But as far as fisq that is something that is encompassing other people and bringing other people into this, or like the community into this fisk and calling them to it, this is a different issue. This is a public issue, not a personal issue. So of course, personal issues, we leave this between them and Allah, and we don't talk about this and whatnot. And in this area, if we said this is personal fisk, then we could say that, okay, yes, this is something without any real issue there, and that this ijma is valid. He also says وأما الوجه المذكور في كتب الفقه لبعض أصحابنا أنه ينعزل وحكي عن المعتزلة أيضا. And he says here, but as for the wedge, like the view that is mentioned within some of the books of fiqh, and he acknowledges this other view that's out there. Of the other, and the books of fiqh, and this is also like al-Juwayni, he talks about this as well. لبعض أصحابنا, this is al-Imam al-Juwayni, rahimahullah ta'ala. He says, أنه ينعزل, that with fisk, that he would be removed from power, just by fisk itself. We're not talking about other issues. We're talking about fisk by itself. وحكي عن المعتزلة. He also says it's narrated from the Mu'tazila as well. فغلط من قائله. So he says this is a mistake. This is a mistake from him, and he went against ijma. And he's going to talk about it here. He says مخالف للإجماع. So he went against ijma. He says قال العلماء. And then this is also important. This sabab here is important to connect with the ijma in and of itself. And the sabab here, if this is sabab, as some of the ulama have mentioned, if the sabab is a qaid, like this is a condition, or like this is the reason that there's ijma against against khuruj. If this is a reason, then all of the texts fit together perfectly. The ijma from, or the khilaf that al-Qurtubi brings, also Juwayni, Ibn Hazm, all of the ijma, it actually makes sense now. If you understand that this is the reason, and this reason is also the defining factor that prohibits the khuruj. And if this factor is there, then we'd say that khuruj is impermissible. And if this factor is not there, then we'd say we go back to the asl that this is something that's differed upon, and we'd have to look at other things as well. And this is according that this person is still Muslim. We're still saying that this is a person Muslim that's still establishing the deen, all right? But he is fasiq, like he does other types of fisk. He says, قال العلماء وسبب عدم انعزاله وتحريم الخروج عليه ما يترتب على ذلك من الفتن. So he says, and the reason for this, the reason that he is not removed is because, and this is clear cut, like when someone thinks about it and also sees what the ulama have to talk about that, they say وتحريم الخروج عليه, that he doesn't get removed right away from this, and also for the reason that it's haram to do khuruj against him is because ما يترتب على ذلك من الفتن, is because of the type of fitna that comes when somebody goes against the ruler. And so of course if we look back at the time of the Sahaba, and we look at the time of Yazid when he came in, and the terrible things that happened in Medina, and the bloodshed that happened when there was khuruj done by some of the Sahaba and Yazid. And of course Yazid, may Allah give him what he deserves. The amount of people that were raped, killed in Medina because of this khuruj, after this, it definitely made people look at this khuruj, and they thought about it in a different light, and they realized there are serious consequences that can happen when khuruj happens. And this, without a doubt, shahid. Like this is something that we see, and this is something that has happened in history. And so when the ulama look at this, they see there's a huge mafsada that comes with khuruj. So because of this huge mafsada, they say if this mafsada, they said no khuruj. So if you're going to say that this khuruj is based on the mafsada itself, there's no problem here. I'm totally agreed with you. If there's a mafsada here, then the khuruj is something that should not be done. If there's a mafsada that's bigger than the mafsada of a fasiq ruling, then I'm totally with everyone. There's no khuruj here. Now, of course, this is the ijma. And there's not an issue of me saying this, that, or the other. Like this is the issue of ijma. There's an ijma in this issue, and of course, every Muslim follows the ijma, the consensus of the ulama in a matter. And in this place, the ijma works together with what al-Qurtubi said. So al-Qurtubi says that he is brought down from his position is null and void. This is assuming that this person can be relieved of his position, assuming that like there's not going to be any fitn in this. So there's an interesting story of the history of the Saudi government, and this is the story of King Saud ibn Abdul Aziz al-Saud. the son of the king of Abdulaziz. He ascended the throne in 1953. He became king in 1953. He was in power, and then he started running the country into the dust until all of the treasuries were empty and things were very, very hard. He was not a qualified leader. So in 1964, after a lot of the shuyukh got together, such as Muhammad Ibrahim, rahimahullah ta'ala, and also a lot of the other shuyukh and the major people in political power, they saw the condition of the country. They saw that this is not sustainable. This guy is going to destroy the country if we leave him in power. They got together and they deposed him from power behind his back, and they put King Faisal in charge instead of him. So they went against the so-called wali al-amr. They took him out and they put another person in power. But note here, is this going against ijma? If you said yes, it's going against ijma, you didn't understand that there was no mafsada that came about by them doing this. In this case, they actually cleared up a mafsada that was definitely a problem, such as this king and King Saud that put them into terrible hardship and was running the country into the dust. And they replaced him with King Faisal, and they did this with no bloodshed because they had everyone behind them when they did this deposing. So this is an interesting story that, of course, that it connects to the Saudi government is very interesting as well. On top of all of that, we have to look at, is the person actually accomplishing the role? In this case, this person that was destroying the country because of his ignorance and because of other issues, they saw that there was a need to get rid of him because he wasn't doing the job of establishing the deen and the dunya and of leading the people according to it. He couldn't lead the people. And this is, of course, of the major conditions of wilayat al-amr, is that he's actually able to have power to lead, and he has the people behind him. He has the power behind them. And so, of course, when he wasn't doing this, they replaced him with another person. They had this little inqilab on him, and he was replaced with someone else in a very subtle way that there was no bloodshed. This is the way that if something is going to happen this way, this is beautiful. Where was their obedience to wilayat al-umur? Where was the obedience here? They took him out and they replaced him. So this is important to understand. Was this khuruj? Was this some illegal khuruj? Was this going against ijma? And are they not really salafiyah? No, they were really salafiyah, and they were really doing what was important, and there was no bloodshed, so they weren't going against ijma here. And so this is an interesting thing. So moving on, which a lot of people, they will stop at this point. They talk about, the ulama have talked about no khuruj because of what we talked about, that if he was to be deposed, and if he were to be, there's going to be khuruj upon him, then there would be ma yatarattabu ala dhalika min al-fitan. There would be lots of fitna and bloodshed, and what's that? Wa iraqatil dami, ad-dima, and that there would be bloodshed, wa fasadi dhatil bayn, and that there would break the ties of kinship. Fatakunu al-mafsadatu fi azlihi akthara minha fi baqa'i. And this is the biggest key, that there would be more mafsada in getting rid of him than there would be in leaving him. And so this is weighing the pros and the cons. If you weigh the pros and the cons in this issue, then you're within the ijma. And this is why they say, even like, yes, there's a mafsada of a fasik being in control, as Al-Qurtubi talks about, because the fasik, he can't actually lead the people properly. There's a problem with him, and this, he no longer has the adala to give people their rights. And so if he's not giving their people the rights, this is the whole point of the job title. The whole job title of the wilayah is to give people their rights and to establish the rights of Allah, of course, and the deen, and the rights of the people, and making sure that they go with each other. So if he's a fasik, he can't do this. And I mentioned this in the last video. Also, then he mentions here, Al-Qadi al-Iyad says, أجمع العلماء على أن الإمامة لا تنعقد لكافر. So this is ijma. First and foremost, it's always important to understand where are the issues of consensus, ijma. And so he says here, if it's a kafir, then there's no wilayah for the kafir. There's ijma that the imama, which is leadership in general, there's no leadership that is tanaqid, that is actually facilitated or actually comes into being. There's no leadership for a kafir. This is very important. Anyone who's a kafir, then this is something he's not a leader. And then the next one, وَعَلَى أَنَّهُ لَوْ طَرَأَ عَلَيْهِ الْكُفْرُ وَانْعَزَلَ. And then if kufr came into this person while he was in power, so say he was, at the beginning, a kafir can't start up and start ruling Muslims. Okay, this is impermissible with ijma, with consensus. And so then he also says, and if kufr came onto one who was already established, then he would be taken out. He says there's ijma in this issue. There's no questions about this. And then he says, قال وكذا لو ترك إقامة الصلوات والدعاء إليها. And then he mentions here, and this is also, and like that, like that he would be removed from power, is if he stopped establishing the salawat. And establishing the salawat means that he is having them established within the masajid, and that he is allowing them to pray and whatnot, and he's calling people وَالدُّعَاءَ إِلَيْهِ, and also calling people to it. So, of course, if someone is saying don't pray in the masajid, if you go to the masjid and get locked up, okay, this is a different issue here, and this person would be his leadership is completely null and void at that point. He says, قال وكذلك عند جمهورهم البدعة. And so he says also within the majority of the ulama, bid'ah would also be of this sort of thing that would also take someone out from being that. And he says jumhur, this is not ijma. And of course, like Imam Ahmad, while Imam Ahmad was with the khulafa of his time, that were speaking with the Mu'tazilis, that were speaking with the Khalq al-Quran and all of this fitna, he also at the same time affirmed that they were still leaders. And so this is of the things that I would say, like bid'ah is of different levels. If it's bid'ah that's kufr, we talked about this at the beginning, the ijma annahu la tan'aqidu li kafir. So if it's a kafir, then it's not established for it. If it comes upon him, then he's removed. This is for a kafir. So if it's bid'ah other than kufr, then in this case, then some of the ulama, which is Qadi al-Ayyad here, rahimahullah, he says this is the majority opinion, that he would be removed for the bid'ah. And this is bid'ah mughalladha. Like if we want to understand it like in a better way, just any type of form of bid'ah, this person counts with beats. No, bid'ah mughalladha. Of course, considering the amount of fitna that can arise with taking one of these out. And so he says also, قال وقال بعض البصريين تنعقد له. And so he mentions here that some of the people, some of the Basriyin, and they said it actually is affirmed for him. And وَتُسْتَدَامُ لَهُ لِأَنَّهُ مُتَأَوِّلٌ. And so he says, and it's also like the wilayah stays for him, or the imamah here, it stays for him because he's muta'awwil. He's mistaken. He thinks that he's upon the right thing, and he's mistaken. And so this is the area of difference of opinion about bid'ah and whatnot. There's a difference of opinion about this. And then Qadi Ayyam, he goes on, he says, قال القاضي فَلَوْ طَرَأَ عَلَيْهِ كُفْرٌ أو تغيير للشرع أو بدعة خرج عن حكم الولاية. So here what Qadi says, he says, if there is kufr that comes upon him while he is in power, or the first one is kufr, أو تغيير للشرع, changing or النكرة في سياق الشرط يعم. And so this is a basic principle, and it's understood. But here is like, this is أو تغيير, any change in the Sharia, any change that comes in the Sharia, that he does to the Sharia, or bid'ah, then he would leave the hukm al-wilaya. خرج عن حكم الولاية. So he no longer has the ruling of wilaya. And wilaya is a hukm that is upon a person if they establish the shuruts. If they are in the conditions, they have the conditions for this, this is the hukm that is established for them. So they get the hukm of all of that samu wa ta'a, that's for them if they're in the hukm of wilaya. If they're not in this, then what? And he says here, and look what Qadi, he talks about what do we do in this situation here. So he says, وَسَقَطَتْ طَاعَتُهُ. So first off, his ta'a is dropped. So if he no longer has the hukm al-wilayat because of the taghyir al-shar', this is what we see most of the time in this day and age. We see the taghyir al-shar', that someone is changing the sharia. Then saqatat ta'atuh. Then his ta'a, he no longer has the ta'a that he would normally have, because he doesn't have the ruling of wilayah. The ruling of wilayah has dropped. Even if he is in a position of control, the ruling of wilayah has dropped. And he says here, وَوَجَبَ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِينَ الْقِيَامُ عَلَيْهِ. He says, and then it's obligatory on the Muslimin to rise up against him. This is first taghyir al-shara, or kufr or taghyir al-shara. So what if you say that taghyir wasn't kufr? Okay, if you don't say that the taghyir wasn't kufr, as maybe some of the people that go on one end and they do takfir on somebody without establishing hujjah or looking into the considerations of what they've gone into. Yeah, we don't do takfir of him, but he changed the sharia. So the hukm of wilayah is gone. And so he no longer has a ta'ah, and he doesn't have, and then he also, it's obligatory for the Muslims to rise up against him. Alright? And this is what he says here. وَخَلْعُهُ وَنَصْبُ إِمَامٍ عَادِلٍ إِنْ أَمْكَنَهُ. All of this is with in أَمْكَنَهُ. And so he says, and also removing him, so they have to rise up against him, they have to remove him, and they also have to replace him with an imam that is adil, like that is just. If they're able to. Of course, this is all if they're able to. And this if they're able to is the wujub al-qiyam against him, like getting rising up against him. This is if they're able to. As far as the ta'ah already dropped. But as far as rising up against him, this is if they're able to. And he's going to talk a little bit about that. And amkanahum dhalika. And so if they're able to do this, if they're able to rise up against them, then they have to do it. But if they're not able to, okay, then it's not obligatory on them. And this is what he talks about here. فَإِن لَمْ يَقَعْ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا بِطَائِفَةٍ وَجَبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِيَامُ بِخَلَى الْكَافِرِ. And so he says, for the case of the kafir, he says, and if this was not able, if they were not able to do this, لَمْ يَقَعْ ذَلِكَ, like if they're not able to do this, إِلَّا, like not everybody is able to do this except for a group. وَجَبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِيَامُ بِخَلَعِ الْكَافِرِ. Then even for a small group, then it's obligatory for them if to remove the kafir. If it's a kafir that's in control, then you have to remove him. I'm not of the people that say that all of these hukam are kafir. I don't say that this. If one of them comes up and they say a kufri statement that is clear-cut kufr, okay, this is a different issue. And I'll leave this to the ulama to talk about this, who of this is, who is kafir and who is not. But in general, we assume that they're Muslim until it's clear-cut proven to us otherwise. And the taghyir al-shar', maybe this person is muta'awwal. And this is something that occasionally there's a lot of ghumud in this issue. There's a lot of ambiguity. That this is a very deep issue that not everyone understands. At one point in time, maybe everyone understood it. At this point in time, you have to establish the hujjah. And this is also Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, when he talked about this issue of changing the sharia, he said this is an issue that you have to establish the hujjah on this person and make sure that they understand it first and foremost before you can do takfir on muayyan, on an individual. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And this is and also looking at the amount of things that go into writing a law, there's a lot of people involved, and not all of them are the ones that have the sole power to write this law or to remove the law. And there's a lot of tafsilat in this, and I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to give rulings on any of the people that are in charge of the different countries around this in this day and age. And so, but he says for the kafir, if there is someone who is a kafir, say this person is a Nasrani, he's a Nasrani or Nusayri, then in this case he's a kafir. He's ascribing himself to something other than Islam. Okay, in this case. He would have to be removed. For anyone who, for the people, they have to come up and they have to remove him in this case. And of course, this is a different case than bid'ah. Bid'ah is if it's able, it's not going to do that. And of course, if this is a big bid'ah. So there's different levels to how you would remove it and how much you would take to remove the person. And he mentions here, and he says, وَلَا يَجِبُ فِي الْمُبْتَدِعِ إِلَّا إِذَا ظَنُّوا الْقُدْرَةِ عَلَيْهِ. So he says here, and it's not obligatory, as I mentioned, there's different levels. It's not obligatory on the mubtadi'. To get rid of the mubtadi', except if they thought, like the people that are going to try to remove him, unless they thought that they're able to do it. If they're able to do it, and they think that they're actually able to do this, in this case they can do it. La yajib. And so he says la yajib, unless then it would be obligatory. So it would be obligatory if they knew that they could get rid of him. And this is bid'ah mughallada. Wallahu a'lam. Some of the shuyukh that mention this, they say that this bid'ah here is mughallada, which is like extreme bid'ah, not just counting with beats or is something that is differed upon. It's something that's without a difference of opinion. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And then he also says, فَإِن تَحَقَّقُوا الْعَجْزَ لَمْ يَجِبِ الْقِيَامِ. And so if we're absolutely sure that we can't do it, then it wouldn't be obligatory for them to go up against this person. وَلْيُهَاجِرِ الْمُسْلِمْ عَنْ أَرْضِهِ إِلَى غَيْرِهَا وَيَفِرَّ بِدِينِهِ. And so he mentions here, and then he says, if the people are not able to remove this leader, that is not a valid leader, he's an invalid leader, then in this case, then it's not obligatory on them, and they should, and the Muslim should leave that place to another place, and run away saving his deen. And of course, this is it should be understood in this case, as some of the other ulama have talked about. This doesn't mean that someone, say if they're in Syria. So if we talk about people that are in Syria right now, and of course the person, Assad, that is in charge, he's Nusayri, and like kafir. And of course I won't say it's about everyone else, but like a Nusayri, they hold specific beliefs that are complete kufr, without a difference of opinion within the Muslimin, that are complete kufr. They're not even, they're loosely considered like the Rafidah. So this person is different. But if we were to say all the Muslims of Ahl Sunnah should leave this place, there'd be a huge mafsada that would come about because of this. Because if you say all the Ahl Sunnah should leave this place, then we're basically giving him the land. We're giving it to the worst types of kufri Ahl al-Bid'ah. Ahl al-Bid'ah that aren't even a part of Islam, like kufri. So that we'd be giving it to someone in that charge. And of course, leaving them with that, this is unwise. And there were some fatwa that came about this with Palestine as well, like giving, like the Ahl Palestine should leave their lands and whatnot. And this is fatwa that is shadda. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And this is, as many of the shuyukh have talked about, this fatwa was a galat. من قائله. And so then he mentions, moving on, he says, وَلَا تَنْعَقِدُ لِفَاسِقٍ ابْتِدَاءً. So if this is a fasiq from the get-go, ibtida'an, from the get-go, like to start off with the fasiq, no, he doesn't get this title from the get-go. It would be refused right from the beginning. فَلَوْ طَرَأَ عَلَى الْخَلِيفَةِ فِسْقٌ قَالَ بَعْضُهُمْ يَجِبُ خَلْعُهُ إِلَّا أَن تَتَرَتَّبَ عَلَيْهِ فِتْنَةٌ وَحَرْبٌ. And this is interesting because this goes against what he just said right beforehand. What Imam Nawawi talked about, the ijma, even if he was a fasaqah, like even if these were fasaqah, and there's ijma that we wouldn't go against them. And here he says that some of them, he says, وقال بعضهم, some of them said, يجب خلعه إلا أن تترتب عليه فتنة وحرب. So you put these two together. Okay, here, what is the issue here? That there's going to be fitna and harb. In this case, yes, if there's going to be fitna and there's going to be warfare and bloodshed that's immense and whatnot, then in this case you don't have to take him out just because he's fasiq. He mentions here, he says, and this is the view of some. This is the sum of the view that. So also we have to understand this ijma that is taken at its generality. No, there's a lot more to it. And this is why I wanted to bring this text here, so people can actually look at the text, see it for themselves, and say, oh, this is what Imam Nawawi is talking about. This is what Qadi al-Iyad is talking about from before. This is not a clear-cut issue, regardless of the case. As long as they're in some type of control, we don't go against them. No. It's not a clear-cut issue such as this. There's a lot of different scenarios, and looking into the scenarios of what are people able to do and what are they not able to do. And so he says here, so some of them said, يَجِبُ خَلْعُهُ إِلَىٰ أَن تَتَرَتَّبَ عَلَيْهِ فِتْنَةٌ وَحَرْبٌ. And so this is one of the views that he mentions here. وَقَالَ جَمَاهِيرُ أَهْلِ السُنَّةِ مِنَ الْفُقَهَاءِ وَالْمُحَدِّثِينَ وَالْمُتَكَلِّمِينَ. So he talks about that the majority of Ahl Sunnah. And he says, of course, Ahl Sunnah is the fuqaha wal muhaddithin, of the people of the fuqaha, and also the muhaddithin, and also mutakallimin. And this is of the later comers that fell into that Ahl al-Kalam. He says, لا ينعزل بالفسق. And so he says that that he does not get removed because of fisq. والظلم, or dhulm, like oppression. وتعطيل الحقوق, or getting rid of people's rights, not getting them their rights. ولا يخلع ولا يجوز الخروج عليه بذلك بل يجب وعظه وتخويفه للأحاديث الواردة في ذلك. And so here he talks about, this is all about fisq. I'm talking about fisq here. I'm not talking about the kufr. Kufr and tagyir al-shar', this was talked about before, that his wilayah is completely null and void. There's no ta'ah for him. This is what Qadi Iyad brings here. But when it comes to fisq is different. And like the jumhur is that we don't do khuruj because of fisq or dhulm or ta'dil al-huquq. So not giving people their rights. وَلَا يُخْلَعُ, in that he's not taken out of his authority forcefully, like out of authority forcefully. He's not taken out. وَلَا يَجُوزُ الْخُرُوجُ عَلَيْهِ بَلْ يَجِبُ وَعْظُهُ وَتَخْوِيفُهُ. And so, but rather it is important that he is reprimanded and also scared with the nusus of the text of the Sharia and whatnot, because of the hadith that come in this regard. And then going forward, he says, قال القاضي. So Qadi Iyad, he says here, وقد ادعى أبو بكر بن مجاهد في هذا الإجماع. And so he says that Abu Bakr ibn Mujahid, that he actually said that there's ijma' in this issue, that is about fisq. He said that there's ijma'. He tried to claim that there's ijma' in this. He said, وقد رد عليه بعضهم هذا بقيام الحسين وابن الزبير وأهل المدينة على بني أمية. And so he mentions here that the people went against him. The way that they said that this ijma' here is invalid about if fisq comes about. They responded to him that al-Husayn وابن زبير وأهل المدينة رضي الله عنهم, that they did khuruj على بني أمية. So they did khuruj. They did khuruj, okay? And he says here, well, also, قِيَامِ جَمَاعَةٍ عَظِيمَةٍ مِنَ التَّابِعِينِ وَالصَّدْرِ الْأَوَّلِ عَلَى الْحَجَّاجِ. He also said, Aman ibn Ash'af. And so, a ton of them. He says a big group of the tabi'in, of the first generation of the tabi'in, was Sadr al-Awwal, al al-Hajjaj of the Sahaba. They did khuruj an al-Hajjaj, Ma ibn Ash'af, and they did it with Ibn Ash'af on them. And so we, of course, like looking at this, yeah, this goes against the consensus that some would say, but let's follow along here what he says about it. He says وتأول هذا القائل قوله ألا ننازع الأمر أهله في أئمة العدل. And so he says, and what did they say when it came to, and the person who says that there's not ijma here, what did they say in regards to that we will not go against, we will not take the amr, or like the ruling away from ahlahu. And he says that we wouldn't take it away from the people that are its people. Ahlahu is like its people. That he mentions here, and that this is understood fi a'immatil adl. And you look at this, and of course this makes sense in some way. You see like that we won't take the amr away from the people that are deserving of it. Ahlahu, like they're muta'ahhilan lahu. And so like these are people that are deserving of it. And they say these are the people who are deserving of it are the immatil adl, like the people that the righteous rulers, or the people that are just, the just rulers. These are the ones who are righteous, that are deserving of it. And this is the hadith refers to the ones who are deserving of the amr, not of the ones who are not ahlahu. And he says here, وحجة الجمهور أن قيامهم على الحجاج ليس بمجرد الفسق بل لما غير من الشرع وظاهر من الكفر. And so here we can talk about the first part of here. He says here, in that the evidence of the jumhur, the majority opinion in this, that the ruler would not be removed because of fisk, which is major sin. They would not be removed because of this. He says when they talk about the qiyam al-hajjaj, they would respond with that it wasn't just fisk that they were going against him with. This was also because of what he changed from the Sharia. This is one thing. And then the next one was ظَاهَرَ مِنَ الْكُفْرِ, and what became apparent from kufr, from him. So the issue of saying that he was actually وَظَاهَرَ مِنَ الْكُفْرِ, to say that he was actually, there was kufr, that Hajjaj was a kafir, this is an issue because Ibn Umar used to pray behind him. So if Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma used to pray behind him, then of course this is proof that he's Muslim. You wouldn't pray behind a non-Muslim. And the khuruj in this case, it would have been because of the mafsada, and because it was so much mafsada that was there, and not just not because he was a kafir in this. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so he mentions here, this is one of the responses. And also al-Qadi Ayyad, he says قال القاضي وقيل إن هذا الخلاف كان أولا ثم حصل الإجماع وعلى منع الخروج عليهم. So he says maybe this was it's said. He says it uses قيل, which is usually used when an opinion is weaker. He says that some, like, it would be, maybe it's said that this was a difference of opinion at the beginning, and then afterwards there was ijma' that we wouldn't go against them. And this is one of the responses to that. And this is it's like, possibly, theoretically speaking, we could think of it as a response, but the fact that there's still this khilaf all the way down, and this is about fisk. This isn't about taghyir al-shar'. Taghyir al-shar', this is without a doubt, this is something that would necessitate a khuruj for the one who's able. And so then he talks about, he goes on, and Imam Nawawi, he goes on alongside of here. And I'm not going to follow the rest of what he says here. And of course, anyone who is interested in reading the rest of this is a great place to read, and to read the whole Kitab al-Imara. This is something that Sheikh Salih al-Usaymi, when in this particular book, like Kitab al-Imara from Imam al-Muslim, he talks about this, and he says that this is of the best ahadith that has ever been brought together in a certain subject, like Kitab al-Imara. He says this is of the best ways that someone could look at this issue of rulership and whatnot, and the way of the hadiths coming together in Sahih al-Muslim is just beautiful, from one to another, one to another, one to another, and there's so much benefits to studying this. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And lastly, I'll mention that the Qaramita, they used to have power and they had power, like political power and rule in much of like the Islamic in much of the Islamic world for a long period of time. And there's no one from Ahl Sunnah that says that their rulership was valid. Yes, they had power. They were ruling. They were ruling in charge, but no one says that that their leadership was a valid leadership, that their imara or that their wilaya was valid. No one says that this was valid. Um, and so this is very important that when we look at this, we look at do we have to obey? Do we have to obey the ruler? And we say, is this an Islamic ruler that has that is not someone who is changing the Sharia? If he's not changing the Sharia, okay, I'm totally with you. He's not changing the Sharia, sama wa ta'a. If he's changing the Sharia, this is a different issue. He doesn't have that ta'a. Now, if he doesn't have the ta'a, am I saying let's do khuruj? No, I'm not saying let's do khuruj. What I'm saying is that we should find a replacement in a peaceful manner that doesn't have bloodshed. And if we can find a way to do this, then great. If we can't find a way to do this, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. And so, in this also, we have to look at, when we look at all of the views here, the difference of if he's a fasik or if he's not a fasik, do we do khuruj or no, do we not do khuruj, and the difference of opinion here. And then also if he is, even if he say he's a mubtada', and like looking at this as well. The reason here when we talk about this fisk and whatnot, you look at what is the main key point. Is there going to be fitna here, or is there not going to be fitna? And I like Saudi Arabia and how they did their little change and their little swap there back in the day. That was something that was nice, because when Muhammad Ibrahim rahimahullah, when he and the bunch of the people of political power and the shuyukh, they all came together and they said, this guy Saud is running us into the ground, and we all basically collaborated behind his back and got rid of him, and then they replaced him. There was no bloodshed. And then Saudi Arabia was much better off after this, and because his brother Faisal, King Faisal, was much better. And so may Allah guide the ummah and guide us to what is pleasing to him, and that he would give us righteous rulers, and that he would give us a khalifa that we're all under. And may Allah make this video a blessing for the people that are seeking truth, and and that he would let ilm spread within the ummah, and that we wouldn't be deceived by the people with political agendas that go against what Allah wishes. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And also, if you like this video, make sure you like it. And if you saw that this video was beneficial, then tell me what you benefited from the video on the bottom. If you think there's other videos or certain things that I didn't discuss and that you would like to have discussed, please write these in the bottom, and I'll see if I can make a video for this in the future. And of course, I don't take any monetization for these videos. I don't monetize them or anything. And so if you're able to support the dawah, then please go ahead and look at my Patreon and see if you're willing to make a monthly contribution. If not, then a single contribution can also be done as well, via PayPal or Zelle. And also, if you think that what I said was wrong, then please look into the aqwal of the ulama and bring them to me. And of course, I prefer someone who addresses the issues that I brought. And of course, some people, they just repeat certain things that have been said by recent scholars, and these issues actually have been addressed in what I brought here. And so may Allah guide us, and also know that, like, my views here, I never want to step outside of where there's ijma, any consensus, any differences of opinion. And if there are differences of opinion that are valid differences of opinion, then we can agree to disagree in this, and we always have the brothership and the understanding of a Muslim is the brother of a Muslim, and this is something, and giving advice to Muslims is of course what the deen is all about. Deen is nasiha, and that this advice is not about wanting the destruction of others, but wanting the guidance of them and wanting the good for others. This is the meaning of nasiha. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.